Well, good morning and welcome back to the Money Advantage podcast. This is Rachel Marshall and Bruce Wayner, and today we are talking about the questions that a good financial advisor would or should be asking you. And Bruce, I really love this conversation. I think that you and I had talked about this last week as we were on the podcast, really thinking through financial planning from a comprehensive perspective and how to make sure that you prepare a spouse to take over for you should you no longer be here. And that prompted the conversation we're about to have today, which was really this idea that as you are thinking about financial planning and wanting to make good decisions, I think it can be really challenging. Bruce, I'll just share from my perspective when it comes to having somebody do something like HVAC maintenance in your house, or something like having them look at your car and tell you what needs to be done. You can have this challenge of saying, well, this is not an area of my personal expertise, and therefore I don't know if I'm choosing well. And do I just have to trust that the person is telling me the truth? Do I ask more questions? Do I get more quotes from multiple people? Do I just go on the basis of feeling? And I think it can come down to that kind of a decision-making process when you're also choosing a financial advisor, which is a very important role in your life, a very critical component of making sure that you're meeting your goals and that you are getting financially the things that you need and want to make good decisions and to be able to accomplish the things that you desire financially. And yet it can be really hard to know if you're working with somebody that is ideal. And so today we're going to help you with that conversation by giving you the questions that a good financial advisor should be asking you. And I'm sure that you're going to hear in this conversation today several things. One is you might be wondering, well, nobody's asked me these questions before. And how should I go about that conversation? Or this could be your encouragement to step into a financial planning conversation for the first time because you're equipped with tools to make sure that it's going to be an ideal fit for you. So, Bruce, thank you so much for being willing to have this conversation today.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the example of the HVAC or a car repair. And uh, back in the 70s, the Shell gasoline service stations that they used to run commercials on television, and it was called the Shell Answer Man. You're
Mm.
too young to you remember this, but my dad had a Shell service station, so I paid attention to it last, and it was basically what you're saying is get the correct answer from your service person. And unfortunately, Rachel, especially nowadays, cars are so complicated that it's not an indictment on a person's character. A lot of time, it's an indictment on a person's competency. And so if somebody says, "Oh, well, I went to get my car fixed and they told me it was this and they were wrong. They were just trying to rip me off." I don't think in most cases that is the truth. I think most cases it comes down to competency. Now, the key here is that if you can ask enough questions, you can figure out, well, I believe you could train yourself to figure out, is this a good possibility that this is what's wrong? Or is this a good way to go with my life, which would maybe include, like we're talking about, our finances today. So you're trying to gather all the information from a variety of sources. And this recently happened to me. I had a car that my check engine light came on. I took it to somebody to actually look at it. They said it was the catalytic converter. Myself, knowing how the computers work, because I've been in auto repair from a little kid with my dad, and then had a place that I actually owned. I knew that the catalytic converter can only send back information to the computer um, based upon what it's getting from other sensors. So that person told me I need a brand new catalytic converter, and I said, "Oh, that's a possibility, but I'm going to do a little bit more research." Now, unfortunately, you know, I have the wherewithal to understand that somebody else would have put a $1,500 catalytic converter in there. All I did was actually tighten my gasoline cap, because that's part of the evaporation recirculation system of it, and the catalytic converter actually actually burns unused fuel before it
Mm.
goes out the tailpipe. So it gets misrepresentation because if the fuel cap is not on properly, you don't get the right evaporation of the fuel going back into the engine and then um, burning it properly. So it is about competency, not just character. And so we're going to talk about financial advisors today, we're not trying to talk about anybody's character. At least I'm not going to, because I choose to believe that most people in every industry, not only ours, are good people. That's the way I'm going to choose to think about it. I do think, though, there is some competency issues, and not because they're not trained well, but because this is also a very complicated industry, just like the automobile. So there's so many things coming at you from all different places. That one person can't possibly know everything. So the best thing is to have a team around you, and then that team be able to ask the proper questions so that they can get enough answers to go to the next team member and say, "Hey, does this sound right? Is this the direction we should be going?"
Bruce, I love that you brought that idea to the forefront, that it's not about a character flaw or somebody trying to mislead you or do the wrong thing for you. And I mean, you're saying let's approach this all with an abundance perspective. People are good, they're trying to do the right thing. What we want to equip you to be able to find is the right person that is going to be the right match for you. That doesn't mean it's the only solution for everybody. It's that if you're looking for comprehensive financial planning and if you're looking for specific things, here are the things that you will need to be aware of and that you should be being asked by a competent professional who is looking comprehensively at your financial picture. And I think the best way of saying that would be you're looking for somebody who's going to be a good match to help you meet your goals. And so that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think you cannot make any financial decision in a vacuum. Some people say, "Well, I'm buying my property and casualty insurance for my car and automobile. So why do I need to know about my future as far as retirement or my current cash flow or if I am I covered if I get a disability or if I die? How's my family? How's this affecting all this?" And the fact of the matter is that you cannot do anything that I know of in one area of your finances that could not potentially have a detrimental effect in the other areas of your finance. So that is why every single financial professional, in my estimation, should be asking about all aspects of your finances. But because of time, or because there's this misnomer that if I ask you about, your cash flow, or if I ask you about your tax situation, or if I ask you about your Social Security, I'm supposed to be an expert about that. And it's not about being an expert, it's about being informed to help that person make the right decision. And so the only way you can be informed is to ask a bunch of questions, a ton of questions. So let's go back to my PNC person. And a lot of longtime listeners may have remembered that I actually lost my wife and I lost our house to a house fire in 2014, complete loss. And if my PNC person, who I have a lot of respect for, would not have asked me about my feelings about, do I have enough money to cover a higher deductible? She actually asked me, do I have enough reserve money so that we could replace everything if we had to? Where are we in our feelings about that? Would you like to take a little bit more risk in the deductible, but less risk on the replacement costs or the cost of living adjustments? Where would you like to take that risk? Because if you have more money in reserve, you can have higher deductibles. If you have higher deductibles, you have less cash flow going out. All these things affect each other. And so even a person like a PNC person should ask some specific questions. So when it comes down to then your financial future, it would make sense that you would ask about all these other things, including Social Security, Medicare, your intentions of leaving a legacy, your intentions of all the other insurances that you might have, liability insurances, umbrella coverages, so on and so forth, because they all intertwined with each other. And so maybe you don't go into a real extensive thing with the fringe insurances about things, but when it comes to financial planning and your insurances as far as disability and life insurance, they better know your complete financial plan.
Bruce, what you're talking about is that a true professional who's going to lead you to make decisions about the best fit for you needs to understand everything that's going on systemically throughout your financial life. The same way a doctor needs to be aware of your blood pressure and your medical history and past surgeries and your cardiovascular system and your respiratory system, and they're looking at your bone system. They're going to be able to understand comprehensively what's going on with you before they can truly make a proper diagnosis or a treatment plan. And what you're bringing to the forefront is that somebody who is going to make the best recommendations for you really does understand you holistically, not just one component. And that's why, just like a doctor, financial planning cannot be a transactional type of conversation where you just say, here's what I want, give me this policy, give me this investment. And with limited information, begin to put an action plan in place. You really do need to understand the big picture first because of all of the effects of one decision on other decisions. And the word that comes to the forefront of my mind for that is opportunity cost. Everything that you choose to do has something that you're choosing not to do as a result of it. And this is that balancing act in every area of your life to ensure that you're getting the best of all worlds, the best in every area.
We make decisions based upon the information we have at the time we make the decision. People a lot of times don't want to get more information because they're afraid they'll have to make a different decision and then have to admit that they maybe didn't make the best decision beforehand because they didn't gather enough information. And what I find is interesting then, why wouldn't you want your financial person to gather as much information as possible to help you make the best decision? So you had brought up some questions today, like why do most financial advisors focus on products like insurance or investment without a full financial picture? Well, I think it's because we live in a time-starved environment that is broken up into maybe 30-second sound bites. And I can think of my wife gets really irritated every time Golden Oak Lending comes on the commercial on the television because I get so irritated at their this I actually think is lack of character because they use fine print where they say their current. Can you believe this? Now we're in 2025, in the summer of 2025, where home loans are pushing 7%, and yet they advertise that they have the lowest rates at 4%. But in fine print, it talks about all the fees to get you down to 4%. And if you amortize those fees throughout the entire 30 years, you're still paying 6.75%. So they are actually, in my mind, trying to gloss over that fact that you're actually paying just about the same amount.
I mean, Bruce, that's
And
like the person who says, well, we sell Cheerios for $5. Well, over here we sell it for $10, but it's on sale for 50% off. And
right, right, right,
you think you're getting a deal,
right.
right?
And then, when people claim like the S&P 500 has returned over the last 100 years 9.96%, which if you do the numbers, the average is 9.96%. If you do the average, it's closer to the upper eights, so about 1% more. When I say, I'm sorry, when you do the actual, it's about upper 8%. And that's because you have money going up and down, up and down, up and down the entire time. It's not one linear percent. And then I tell clients, well, I when they say, well, shouldn't I just be in the S&P 500 and not worry about it? And I said, but what time frame are you talking about when they say, well, it's average not almost 10%? So, but what's the time frame? Is that time frame matching your time frame? You don't know Because if you looked at the lost decade of 2000 to 2010, the S&P returned almost flat when you include fees involved in the situation. So if that's your time frame, then the almost 10% return is irrelevant. So you have to ask those kind of questions. What is the foundational questions that must be asked before any financial tool is recommended? So I think the financial questions that you ask is first of all, it's not just about the the product. It's about the competency or the what other things can that financial professional bring to the table? Are you really answering the the the, the key question that day? You know, a lot of times people might say, well, how much money should I put away every month out of my paycheck so I can retire at age 65? And they want that answer. But the key question is, what other things are you worried about? So what's the most significant reason that that you are really worried about today? And if they say, well, that is the most significant reason, then you might say, well, why is that the most significant reason? Well, because I'm tired of working and I want to make sure that I don't have to work at it after age 65. Okay. What about cash flow today? Are you actually going to be able to put away that kind of money into the future? And do you know your cash flow? Do you understand the risk to be able to actually get out of that situation? If you can get into another situation where you don't hate it as much, would you consider delaying your retirement 5 years, 10 years, or maybe not at all? And I've been asking this question in masterminds all the time. When people say, "Oh yeah, can you help me retire?" And I say, "Why do you want to retire?" And they say, "Well, I hate my situation." I said, "Well, if we can get you into a different situation that you don't hate, would you retire?" And people have a hard time switching their brain because the most common answer I get with that is, "Yeah, I just want to retire." Because they can't separate the pain and see the perfect situation or near perfect situation where they're actually doing something in their career that they enjoy. They can't do that. So trying to get people to think about their future in a different way.
Bruce, what I think is
Here's
really interesting about that is that I think that it can be really easy in a financial space for somebody to want to have clarity, but not necessarily have clarity about what their cash flow is, where their money is sitting, how much is in tax deferred versus tax, you know, taxable accounts versus tax preferred accounts. They might not really have clarity on what their net worth is, what their their income and their expenses and their assets and their liabilities. They might not really have a crystal clear perspective, and they might not, also not necessarily have a very clear picture of exactly what they want in the future. And so, with all of that potential lack of clarity, it can be really easy to grasp at something and wish that you had a firm foundation, that you wish you had something that you could count on or depend on. And I think that's probably why people then make judgment calls like, this is exactly what I want. I want to retire at this age with this amount of income. It's the closest thing to clarity that they can hang on to be able to have confidence about something. And yet, where you really get that confidence is about being honest about why you want those things. And so, Bruce, I think instead of feeling uncomfortable with the lack of clarity, you can have somebody walk you through your financial picture to really help you get that clarity. And then, secondly, it's really important to understand why you want the things that you want. And that takes a lot of introspection to be able to answer those questions. But that's how you lead yourself or lead anyone to being able to make the ideal decision, to really understand why you want what you think you want.
Yeah, and taking responsibility of your own action, but also getting help from financial professionals. Because I think that's one of the reasons I feel this a lot when people engage us is they feel like if I engage somebody and they don't do what I want to be done, then I can blame them and not take personal responsibility for it. And I see that as one of the bigger things I see in society now is people not taking personal responsibility. They want to just blame somebody else. But once again, that kind of comes down to what we're talking about is a bigger number. Hey, I can give you X amount of growth over here because look at this bigger number over here. It might cause you to pay more taxes and it might not be guaranteed, but look at this big number over here. This other person might be saying, "Hey, we're just going to work on cash flow. You might not have a big pile of money, but you'll have cash flow for yourself. It could be guaranteed. It could actually be growing. It could be without taxes. There could be a lot of things that reason to be bigger." Once had a person that wanted to talk to us at the Money Advantage, and he asked me point blank, "My, what is your net worth?" He asked me that personally. And I said, "Well, why are you asking? I'll be glad to tell you, but why are you asking?" And he said, "Because I'm not working with anybody that doesn't have more money than I do." And I said, "So is the goal to have more money than somebody else, or is the goal to have cash flow, more cash flow than somebody else?" Because all you're doing with that big pile of money is just turning it into cash flow. And so you the heart the heartbeat of any good financial situation is cash flow. It's not this big pile of money. Uh, the American farmer can tell you that. The American farmer is actually net worth wise better off than most people, but all their money is actually sitting in the actual property that they live on and farm on. But if they have a bad crop one year, what happens to the cash flow? They have zero cash flow or very reduced cash flow, and they can't even pay their bills. And yet they're sitting on, in some cases, actually, I was working on a client today. They're about to buy a 15 million piece of property um, that has no cash flow on it right now. So their net worth won't be quite 15 million because they're using some leverage, but it's going to be over 7 million on just that because they're using 7 million of leverage. So their net worth is really high, but they're scared to death they're not going to be able to cover the cash flow or the debt with the cash flow. So uh, it's not about net worth, it's about actually cash flow. So a lot of things that your financial person should be asking you about is cash flow. Let's just hit a couple of more things. I think you should ask is, do you anticipate any big ticket purchases in the next 12 to 24 months? So can you handle those with cash flow, or do you have reserves for that? What is your definition of retirement? Some people's definition of retirement is actually to go into the boss and say, "I'm giving you 2 weeks notice and I never have to work again." Another person's definition is, "Hey, I want to do that hobby that I always wanted to do. I'm going to need cash flow for that." Another one is, "I'm not going to do anything but the bare minimum. I don't care if I have to eat really poorly. I don't care if I can't go do anything fun. I don't care. I just don't want to work." And so everybody's definition of retirement is different. Another person might say, "Hey, I want to work part time. I want to keep active. I want to maybe do 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week." That might be their definition of retirement. Here's a really important one, Rachel. What role does your tax professional play in your investment decisions? That comes back to down to cash flow again, because if you have to pay more in taxes, you have actually less cash flow. And if you don't do good things and you want to leave a legacy, you actually have to sell things to actually pay your estate taxes. One of the reasons that this person's uh, selling this $15 million plot of land is because they owe estate taxes and they have no liquid money to do this. So this particular farmer actually got the acreage at $1,500 discount per acre
Mm.
because he knew they had to sell, and those people are actually have to settle up within 18 months, so or have additional penalties. So that's really important. Your tax professional is really important. Another thing that a lot of people don't know is that your Social Security is actually taxed differently according to how much your taxable income is. your taxable income can be actually brought down with certain tax strategies if your tax person understands tax mitigation. Here's one of the most uh, penal things that is coming into tax preparation is something called the IRMA brackets, which stands for income related monthly adjusted amount. It's a fancy way of saying the more you make, the more you have to actually pay for your Part B and Part D Medicare premiums. And there's no phase out. You go over by $1, you get pushed up into the next bracket. $1. And frankly, that's 51 cents because in the IRS, they always round up in cents. So it's really, you go over by 51 cents, you have to pay
Hmm.
this bigger tax. So really your tax professionals should be helping you in all these things. You should be asking people, is it important to leave some type of legacy? And then to get to these type of questions, we actually ask a whole bunch of other questions from new people, and then we update these. Are you or your spouse currently receiving Social Security, disability, or any other government benefits? If you are married, have you signed a pre or post nuptial agreement? Have your spouse ever filed gift tax returns? It's one of the ways to keep down your estate tax in the future. Have your spouse completed wills, trusts, and estate planning? Rachel, this may be the most alarming thing that I see on a weekly basis is how few people have their actual legal documents in place. And we're not even talking about well off, only well off people have it in place. A lot of times, very well off people do not have their legal documents in place. Do you support any charitable organizations? So maybe the people want to give to that continually into retirement. Are you currently the beneficiary of anyone else's trust? I ask this all the time, and it's uncomfortable to ask because when you are asking somebody, hey, are you a beneficiary of a will or a trust? Do you expect an inheritance? It's a visceral reaction to people. But I need to know that if I'm going to help you out, because we could actually leverage the potential of money flowing down to the next generation, that we can prepare you for it, not only your generation, but the generation and generation after that, so that we actually honor that amount going further. But most people want to put their head in the sand because they think they're bad people if they, it's almost like they're hoping for their parents to die or their grandparents to die. And that's not the purpose of it. It's actually to honor that gift going down to the
Mhm.
next generation so that you know and you prepare and you can protect it and grow it and keep that person's legacy in in the presence of not only you but in the subsequent generations.
Bruce,
You
I'm
you
really I'm really glad you brought that up because we talk on the legacy planning side of the work that we do often with parents who ultimately do plan to leave an inheritance to their children. And the number one way to ensure that that inheritance will actually be used for your intended purposes is to prepare and equip that generation to receive an inheritance well, which means communication. So if the receiving generation doesn't know or is closed off to the idea that there will be wealth flowing to them, then adequate planning cannot take place. So I'm really glad that you addressed that, but specifically that you brought up that point that that is a part of the planning process to recognize windfalls or money that will come your into your arms at some point on the basis of someone else's trust.
Yeah, here's another really good one, which has to do with legacy planning. Do any of your children have special educational, medical, or physical needs? Because most of the time when that happens, they are eligible for government benefits if they keep their income to and their total assets to a certain amount. And if you don't do that, now when that flows down to the next generation, then it actually kicks them out of those special needs programs. So you can actually do special needs trust that can actually keep those assets from going to them or going to them in a way that is acceptable by both the federal and state governments to keep their benefits? Do you have children with that are currently on government support? Do you provide primary or major financial support to adults' children? This is actually unbelievably stressful on families right now. And I don't know when it turned, and I'm not going to try to act like the old guy, like get off my lawn, and it was better in my day. But it really is kind of like a different. We've switched our cultural way of doing things to now we're enabling the next generation. I don't know what my father never told me that when I turned 16, I have to get out of the house. He never said that. I was excited to build a new future for myself. And I wanted to do it as soon as possible. But maybe it was because somehow I knew that I was not going to be the beneficiary of monthly amounts from my father, so that I didn't have to go do something. So from a young age, I my whole life was looking for this. Right now, Rachel, I have clients that want to retire, and they the biggest one I can think of is not only paying for their rent in Manhattan, which is about $3,500 a month for a very small apartment,
Hmm.
but they're also subsidizing them at close to $1,500 additional a month for cell phone and just spending money and so on and so forth. And they say, well, I have to do that because they really wanted to have a a copywriter's job for social media, and they wanted to live in New York. I'm like, okay, that doesn't make any sense because I know copywriters can actually live anywhere they want. Okay, they don't have to live in New York. That person actually works out of their apartment in New York. Okay, for people all across the United States, they only make $80,000, and they're trying to live on a gift, or they are living on a net gift of $60,000 a year net from the 3,500 and 1,500. But the client is not willing to tell them that they can't live there. They have to go somewhere else. And I'm not sure what happened there in our society that this happened, but this happened over and over. I see $800 car payments. I see cell phone. I
Mm.
see I see car insurance is a big one, and that they just keep going over and over.
And
You
Bruce,
need to
I'm just
know
gonna put a
these
quick plug
children expenses.
back to a podcast we did quite a while ago. I want to say maybe 3, 4 years ago about how to get adult kids off your payroll. But this idea then that potentially you communicated something to your child at some point that you would pay for, and then that conversation never was revisited. There was never an end point to it. There was never stipulations or qualifications for that gift, or that payment of a cell phone or insurance or the car or whatever it was. And now you're in a situation where it's feeling like a burden, where clear communication is necessary, but also an understanding that it's highly valuable for you to be having financial awareness conversations with your young people, with your children, with your teenagers, talking with them about what is a good financial investment, looking at things like education in terms of, is this a good financial investment? Is there a good return for what we put into it, what we expect to get out of it? And there is a lot of things that are expensive in this world today. I mean, I know that a lot of things are expensive. Cost of living is high. And at the same time, there are ways to minimize expenses and be in a position where you can, even as a young person out of the home, be in a position where you are still having good financial habits and beginning to save and living beneath your means. But it's all training and character and financial literacy development that's needed.
I don't know if it's if there's a feeling of guilt because of the way we've manipulated our currency and caused inflation since the early 70s, and parents are feeling guilty because they're both working and they didn't have as much time to spend with the children or so on
Oh,
and so
I'm sure
forth.
that's a part.
Yeah, and because it always seems to be something about guilt. Well, I know they don't really have this, but that they're not living the same life as they were with us, and they don't like to see their kids struggle. And struggle actually builds character and resolve and so on and so forth. So, um, but I think you need to. good financial person needs to know the other things that are going on with their children's lives too, because they need to know what that outflow is. Hey, just doing a simple we call it a cash flow awareness exercise. Making sure you understand where your cash is flowing to. So it's not to tell you you can't flow it there anymore, but that you can make the decision whether you want it to flow there or not. I like to finish my portion of the podcast today by asking people these 5 things. You really should have, and these should be written, okay? Not a guesstimate, a written plan for income. Do you have an income plan? Do you have a risk plan on everything that could derail? Do you have a tax plan? Do you have an estate plan? And finally, this is one of those things, again, it's just a bigger number. People say you got to keep the fees down. I'm not saying fees are not important, but if you get what you want, why do fees matter? And then you also have to determine, is that fee actually a fee coming from your money, or is it actually coming from the marketing budget of the product division that you're buying something from? Because an asset under management fee, which I don't think is a bad thing, that money, you have to overcome that hurdle. That's what I was saying about earlier. Net of fees. If you do some other products, whether they're alternative investments, whether they are insurance related products, there's a commission paid. And somehow, some way, we are being bombarded that commissions are bad. But those commissions don't actually come out of your money. All of your money actually gets working for you right away. Those commissions come out of the marketing budget for that particular alternative investment or that particular insurance company. Now, I know what some very sophisticated people were saying. Yes, but if they didn't pay the commissions, they could pay more in the insurance product. That's true, except you need a competent financial professional to actually purchase these products through, or a competent investment broker dealer to purchase these alternative investments through. You can't purchase them yourself in these markets. You might be able to purchase some Reg Ds, but I've seen the Reg Ds in independent Reg Ds that are offered on social media that come with no fees, or commissions that people think, but then their fees are astronomical. So you have to understand how to read a PPM, which is basically the set of rules for that investment. If you don't know how to read those and you don't understand the fees in that, then you're not going to be able to overcome those hurdles. So there's a variety of things. Those are the 5 things, and I'll go over them again. You need to have a written income plan, a risk plan, a tax plan, an estate plan, and then a fee plan. You have to know where your money's flowing to.
Bruce, I think this is really clarifying for somebody who is trying to make ideal financial decisions because it can be really easy to have a feeling or an emotion associated with some kind of decision making when it comes to finances, and then cloud over all of the logical judgment and wise decision making and just go with that feeling. And it's really important to be able to logically, factually understand with clarity what's going on in your financial life so you can simplify the conversation and make effective decisions. I think the reason that you need a financial advisor, specifically with the commissionable products that you were just talking about, is that you don't just want a product, you want advising for the right product with the right strategy to use it, utilizing the right principles that match your value system. And when you have all of that working together, that simplifies your financial life and helps you get what you want. It's not as simple as walking to the grocery store and pulling a product off the shelf. I mean, that would be making a decision just based on marketing or your feeling in the moment or a smattering of mismatched ideas. But let's just say you were working with somebody who was a nutritionist who was giving you a meal plan and a diet plan and an exercise plan, and they were recommending exactly based on your body type and your blood type and your fitness level and your medical conditions, and they were giving you an exact plan with a grocery list and telling you what products to purchase. That would be a lot more systematic and orderly, and you would be able to get the results that you're looking for much more effectively. And similarly with your finances, if you are creating a coordinated plan where everything is working together, you're ensuring that your plan is not offset by some unforeseen risk that can just wipe out the whole strategy and take down everything that you've built. You really need to ensure that all of the foundational pieces are in place first. And Bruce, I really love that you mentioned the estate plan because what we see, big picture, is that when people who have financial means are thinking about what they can do for the generations after them, not only deciding to bless their children with an inheritance, not only that, but just recognizing that they probably won't use up all of their money during their lifetime and that there will ultimately be a wealth transfer. The there's a lot of emotion even around that. But what ultimately ends up happening is they think, well, I've got the money, I've got it covered. The next step is to ensure that you have the estate plan to make sure that the legal transfer works the way that you want it to. And even with just that, that's a huge step ahead of those that have chosen not to do any legal planning. There is still another step that's needed to make the whole thing really work, and that is to be clear on your value system so that the way that you transfer money and the way that you build wealth is all connected to your values and the real meaning that you want to pass down from generation to generation. And that's what allows money to keep lasting rather than just getting used up or being spent by generations that become entitled and expect to be able to just live off of what you've provided to them. Bruce, I think that if somebody's listening to this episode, I think there can be lots of things happening. One would be, oh man, I really am realizing that I can use these questions to go to somebody and ask them these questions because now I have a lens to look big picture at what's going on in my financial life. And I need to be able to dialogue on all of those points with a financial professional who's going to advise me, be that outside lens, that outside pair of eyes, help me see my blind spots, make recommendations, and allow me to accomplish my goals and optimize my financial future. So one feeling could be I'm feeling excited about looking at this holistically. Another feeling could be I have a relationship with a financial advisor and I'm not getting any of these questions right now. What do I do? What do I do from that position of recognizing that I'm not having this holistic conversation? And now you want to have that holistic conversation. Bruce, what would you tell somebody who's in that position?
They're if they're if they're not wanting to have a holistic,
No, they are hearing us talking about this holistic conversation, but they're recognizing they have a financial advisor. They're not getting the holistic conversation
yes,
right now.
this is the most difficult thing. And I don't mean this to come off as sexist. I think it's more just reality. Women have developed this more of an empathy and emotional attachment to people because of the raising and have childbearing um, responsibilities. So they tend to not want to disrupt their financial relationships, even when they're not getting what they want,
Hmm.
which I find very, very interesting. They find it to be very difficult. Men still do it though. They were like, well, I've known him for 24 years. I didn't, I just don't, he's a good person. Can't we just work with them? The problem is what I've noticed, and I feel like sometimes I feel this way. I get defensive if somebody wants to leave. I can only remember actually two people in my career that have actually left from me. And I can remember two insurance policies now that have been surrendered to a 1035, changed somewhere else. So it doesn't happen very often. But the bottom line is that you need to have somebody that's willing to work as a team, but I found that once that person asks, hey, will you talk to this person? I want you to coordinate. They shut down. They can completely shut down. And that's why a lot of financial professionals will not work with you unless they can control the entire financial picture. We're not there yet, Rachel. At E3 are the money advantage. We would still like to show our worth, show our value, and maybe gradually move things over to total control because you're going to see that you're missing some things without that coordination, that and what I would call easy coordination. Easy coordination. You're not justifying everything you're doing every time. You're slowing down. Then you have to insert yourself more, and it gets frustrating. So I would say try to find an individual that is more like a general contractor or a general practitioner for your healthcare that has a network of financial professionals that they either have direct relationships with or they have a vetted out relationship with, that they know that there's not going to be any angst amongst those. They're an abundance mindset. They're going to work together for the client. And that having that is the team that really is going to work for you to build not only this your network now but for future generations.
So, if you are currently working with a financial advisor and you're recognizing that you have outgrown the advice that you're getting, maybe you're recognizing that the questions you've been asked are too narrow or too transactional and they're related just to a particular product, or you're not getting the comprehensive conversation. You're not getting clarity on your big financial picture. You're not getting the clarity that you need to ensure you have the right protection and you have the right income plan and your risk plan is handled and you have the right tax plan that's mitigating tax going forward and you have the right estate plan in place and you have the right fee plan. If you do not feel comfortable that you have these things in place, what I would encourage you to do is reach out to our team for a conversation. And Bruce, you just were sharing that we're not going to say you have to immediately move everything over to us and we have to take over every single piece of your financial life. But you can have a conversation with us to begin the dialogue and see if it would be the right fit for you. And that's really what we do in a first conversation here at the Money Advantage. We don't expect somebody to wholeheartedly move everything over to our team. We do demonstrate our value to you, and we ask you to make a decision if it is a good fit in working together to accomplish your goals. And so that's a conversation that we hope is easier than feeling like you're going to have to completely step into another world. I realize that change can be difficult. Leaving a job, leaving an employer, leaving any situation where you have established relationships can be difficult. And yet, I would encourage you to make sure that you're making decisions that you know are in your best interest, are the best decisions for your financial future. And if you're getting that peace of mind and that clarity of knowing that you're comprehensively making the best decisions, you understand the decisions that you're making, and you have clarity and peace in your financial life, that would be the true test of knowing that you have been asked all the right questions that a good financial advisor should be asking you. Bruce, is there anything else that you want to share before we close?
No, I think this is an emotional thing for people to think about. And I would just encourage people that you actually, it's a great emotional feeling when you actually do take control of this and put time and energy in it to take that control. I've seen it over and over where people have said, I was really regretting this, going through this process, but now that I've gone through the process, I'm so glad that I have.
That's a good process to go through. I say that to people that we work with in legacy coaching. It's the same feeling that if you're going to the gym, it's probably not going to feel comfortable while you are there, but when you leave, when you have built up the stamina, the strength, the endurance, you have something that feels so good that you have accomplished, that you have fought for and that you have done. So let your financial life have that kind of satisfaction. You can reach out to our team at themoneyadvantage.com. You can book a call on our advisor calendar right on that front homepage. And we look forward to starting a conversation with you if that's something that you're interested in. And today, remember, success leaves clues. So model the successful few, not the crowd, and build a life and business you love. We'll see you next time.